Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and honestly, completely unsolvable demographic crisis that's hiding in plain sight within modern geopolitics. We are looking at the real-time collapse of the largest tank reserve in human history. You see, the Soviet Union left behind this massive machine, an industrial and military inheritance built up over 40 years, and it was designed to endure pretty much any conflict indefinitely. But as we'll see today, that massive system is breaking down. And it's not just because of battlefield losses. It's happening because the very people needed to maintain and rebuild it simply do not exist.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around this crisis, we first have to grasp the sheer staggering scale of the Soviet tank inheritance that was sitting in storage yards at the end of 2021. 7,342 tanks. I mean, we aren't just talking about a few surplus vehicles here. This was a literal ocean of armor kept in frozen storage across the country. It was built as the ultimate insurance policy. The idea was that, in the event of a massive conflict, losses could be replaced cheaply and, theoretically, forever. It took 4 decades of non-stop manufacturing to build up that stockpile.
But let's fast forward to the end of 2024. That massive number, it's been basically slashed in half. Today, independent visual analysts have confirmed over 4,300 destroyed tanks, and the reserve yards reflect that reality perfectly. They've dropped from over 7,000 down to just 3,517. And keep in mind, that destruction number is just the floor. That only counts the wrecks that have been physically caught on camera and documented.
When you look at the trend, it brilliantly illustrates the intense burn rate we're seeing right now. It's honestly wild to track. You are watching half of an 80-year inheritance vanish in just 3 short years. The line simply falls off a cliff. The incredible thing to grasp here is the sheer speed of consumption. What took generations of Soviet industry to carefully stockpile is being erased in a fraction of the time, and it's leading straight to a very steep, very real projected cliff edge in the near future.
Now, as that overall number plummets, something deeply revealing is happening to the actual quality of what's left. We call this the generational reversal. Because obviously, you're going to send your best equipment to the front lines first, right? So the newest, top-tier tanks vanished earliest. Out of nearly 2,000 pre-war modern tanks, only a few hundred remain today.
It's literally like watching a military travel backward in time. We start in the 2020s with modern, top-tier armor. But as that gets destroyed, satellite imagery over the past couple of years shows 1960s designed tanks being reactivated on a massive scale. And it gets crazier. We are now seeing tanks designed in 1946 being pulled from storage. Think about that. Some of these machines are literally older than the grandfathers of the soldiers driving them. They're pulling out these antiques, covering them in modern up armor, and sending them to the front line. They are deploying museum pieces just to maintain volume on the battlefield. So the ultimate consequence of this timeline reversal is incredibly stark. The newest available satellite surveys show us that across all these storage bases, there are roughly 850 realistically usable tanks left. That's after you account for massive decay and the fact that a ton of them have been cannibalized just for spare parts. But out of those remaining usable tanks, absolutely zero are newest generation models. The reserve of modern armor has essentially hit rock bottom.
This naturally leads us to a highly debated question, one you're probably asking yourself right now. If the storage yards are running dry and the older tanks are heavily depleted, why can't a historic military powerhouse simply manufacture more modern equipment to fill the gap? I mean, why rely on rusting antiques from 1946 when you supposedly have a massive defense industry at your disposal? Well, your first thought might be, oh, it's Western sanctions. They must have successfully cut off the advanced materials and microchips. But actually, that's not it. 95% of examined Russian missiles and drones still contain foreign components. In fact, earlier this year, a single recovered cruise missile contained more than 100 Western-made parts. So sanctions definitely haven't stopped the flow of technology. The reality is that smugglers are just routing right around the logistical hurdles. High-tech chips manufactured in the US and Europe are being funneled through intermediaries in places like China, Turkey, and the UAE. From there, they go directly onto the factory floor and straight into a warhead. The international supply chain has completely adapted, and those critical parts are still getting through without much issue. But here is where we uncover the real story of this explainer. We have to look completely past the supply chain illusion. Because honestly, it doesn't matter if you can smuggle 10,000 top-tier microchips into the country. Those parts are totally meaningless if you lack the human element to physically assemble them. Even with all the smuggled parts in the world, a machine cannot build itself. And this is an absolutely vital takeaway. Human capital is the one resource you cannot smuggle.
Which brings us to the core of the issue. The true ultimate bottleneck driving this entire crisis comes down to a single number: 160,000. That is the staggering shortfall of missing defense specialists right now. We aren't just talking about a lack of basic raw recruits here. We are talking about highly specialized heavy industrial labor. The people who actually know how to run complex lathes, the specialists who can safely weld heavy tank hulls, the engineers who assemble advanced machinery. The defense sector is missing 160,000 of these specific workers, and it simply cannot find them.
So why can't they find them? Where do they go? Well, this missing workforce isn't just a temporary hiring freeze or a wage dispute. It's actually a direct, completely irreversible demographic consequence of the 1990s birth rate collapse. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a severe demographic decline. The children that were never born in the late 90s would be in their late 20s and early 30s right now, the absolute prime age for specialized, physically demanding factory labor. The reason the factories are short exactly 160,000 workers is that the generation required to weld those hulls literally never existed. And the real-world impact of that missing workforce is profound. Because they are short these 160,000 specialists, Russia's single tank factory is functionally paralyzed right now. They are only planning to build 10 brand new, latest model tanks this entire year. Just 10. To even try and keep the lights on, they've been resorting to employing convict labor since 2022, they're cutting wages below regional averages, and they are currently facing lawsuits from their own suppliers that they just cannot afford to pay. The whole industrial base is suffocating from a lack of human capital.
Let's put the battlefield reality side by side with the industrial reality for a second, because the math is incredibly stark. On one hand, we have over 4,000 confirmed destroyed tanks in just 4 years. On the other hand, leaked internal defense documents reveal a plan that will take 10 full years to build just 2,600 replacements. Let that sink in. A full decade of production won't even replace what has already been visually confirmed as destroyed in the last 4 years. The production rate mathematically cannot possibly catch up to the burn rate.
And we don't just have to take the word of outside analysts for this. Listen to how impartially and plainly Russia's own central bank governor summarizes this unprecedented crisis. Quote, "We have truly never lived in such a shortage of workforce in the modern history of Russia." That is a frank, open admission right from the top of the economic system. Those missing 160,000 factory workers have created a historical void that no amount of money or state policy can instantly fix.
When you tally up the inevitable math of this situation, sure, raw numbers might hold up on paper for a short time by cannibalizing old stock. The total number of vehicles might even temporarily edge pre-war levels. But the specific, irreplaceable Soviet inheritance, that massive stockpile of ready-to-go, highly capable armor, is gone. The replacements are older, weaker, and vastly slower to build. And according to those very same leaked internal planning documents, the exhaustion of realistically recoverable equipment is imminent. They're projecting it for late this year or early next.
As we wrap up this explainer, the data paints a really vivid picture of a system running headfirst into an immovable demographic wall. Smuggled microchips and aging, rusty metal can only take an industrial base so far. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider. How long can any system, no matter how historically vast, continue to run when the people required to maintain and rebuild it simply never existed in the first place?